2024 Migration Summit, Day 3. I can't believe we're on Day 3 already. My name is Lorraine Charles. I'm one of the co-leads of the Migration Summit. The Migration Summit 2024, organized by MIT, Emerging Talent, NAML, and Karam Foundation, is a week-long global convening designed to build bridges between diverse communities of displaced learners, universities, companies, social enterprises, policymakers, employers, and governments around key challenges and opportunities for refugee and migrant communities. This year, we're exploring the theme Unlocking and Engaging Talent, Pathways for Dignified Work through virtual and in-person events hosted all around the world. I'm really excited by today's session, not only because I've been a big fan of Jobtech Alliance for a long time, but because they've now become dear friends. I'm really pleased to introduce Michelle Hassan, the co-director of Jobtech Alliance, who will be your host and introduce you to the rest of the panelists. Over to you, Michelle, and good luck and see you all.
Great, thanks, Lorraine. So hi, everyone, and welcome to our session discussing some of the learnings we've had in Uganda. As you know, I work for Jobtech Alliance. Jobtech Alliance is an ecosystem initiative around inclusive job tech or companies in Africa. It was launched in late 2021, and in the last 2 years, we've been learning a lot on what works, what doesn't work. We've been in Uganda for like the last year and a half, and we wanted to share some of the learnings we've gotten from that project. What Jobtech Alliance does is also interested in how like digital platforms are able to kind of connect to people, especially vulnerable communities like refugees, to work opportunities that actually end up building sustainable livelihoods. So for this session today, we wanted to focus on our refugee learning. And as you all know, like the global refugee crisis has displaced millions of people from their homes and communities. But also we see an opportunities as they seek refugee and host communities. There are opportunities for digital economy to actually present new pathways for refugee employment and entrepreneurship. So when you think about platforms that are offering things like online freelancing or microtasking or the gig economy, we see that as potential opportunities. So we've set up a nice panel that's bringing together leading experts within that whole ecosystem of job tech, but also practitioners who have ended up working and testing out the different models that can be able to kind of create sustainable income sources. Our panel will share valuable insights into what are the challenges they saw, but also what are the kind of the opportunities we're seeing, and also as well as what are the strategies and kind of training initiatives that are being employed to equip refugees either on digital literacy, technical skills, and soft skills that then are needed for the online workforce. They'll also discuss lessons that we've learned from our ongoing effort of the work we're doing in Uganda to connect refugees to these digital livelihoods, shedding light on actually what's working, what barriers are still remaining, and kind of like the future outlook of how do you leverage technology to kind of create economic inclusion for displaced person. So at this juncture, I'd actually like to welcome my panel. I want to introduce you first to Simon Marot. So maybe Simon, you can introduce yourself, say what you do and come from.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Hello, everyone. So my name is Simon Marot. I work as the team lead at the African Youth Action Network, one of the refugee-led organization partner for the Job Tech for refugees here in Uganda. So we work with other refugee-led organizations, Masuko and the Job Tech Alliance team, to ensure that refugees are actually onboarded, supported while they actually engage and use some of this platform. I'm happy to actually be engaging with you, and we look forward to sharing some of our experiences working with the refugees here in Kampala. Thank you. Over to you, Michelle.
Great, thanks, Simon. Richard is one of our practitioners. So maybe Richard, you can talk a little bit about what Razi does.
Thank you, Michelle. My name is Richard. I work for Razi. We're a market intelligence platform. And basically what we do is help businesses have access to on-ground data across emerging markets, which pretty much covers Africa, Southeast Asia, and some bits of South America. My role is the Vice President for Community and Engagement, which covers a community of data collectors across these markets. And what we do is leverage consumers on our platform to get access to data, but also in return, they're able to earn some extra income while they're doing that. So that's pretty much what I do. Delighted to be here. Thanks, Michelle.
Great, thanks, Richard. And Mike, you're next.
Thank you, Michelle. My name is Mike Otieno, one of the co-founders at Wowzy. So what Wowzy does is connect content creators, or what you refer to as influencers, to brands for paid campaigns. And we see a massive opportunity for refugees in this. So later I'll be sharing a little bit more of our experiments with the Jobtech Alliance in Uganda. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And finally on our panel is Brenda.
Yes, hi, thanks, Michelle. Hi, everybody. I'm part of Jobtech Alliance with Michelle as well, but I focus on the Jobtech for Refugees program. I'm the senior venture partner, and basically trying to create jobs. So we work with Jobtech platforms in Uganda to see opportunities where we can place refugees and also just improve quality of work. So that's basically what I do. I work both with the RLOs like Simon. So it's glad to also see Simon on the panel. And we partner with RLOs and then also bring them together with the private sector through the Jobtech platform so that then we can collaborate and work together on placing refugees. So nice to meet you all, and I can't wait to share our insights.
Great, thanks, Brenda. As you can see, we kind of have a wide range. As mentioned, Jobtech Alliance is looking at the whole thing as an ecosystem. So we understand cannot only just happen as one, but also as a whole thing. So Brenda, I'll actually start with you on why did we decide to focus on Jobtech, or Jobtech decided to focus on refugees?
Thanks, Michelle. So basically, I think we all had the introduction that Michelle gave around Jobtech. So while we are an ecosystem building initiative, just some key things to remember is Jobtech Alliance as a whole focuses on leveraging tech through platforms to scale, which is creation of jobs, quality of work, and there's a very keen focus on inclusion while we do that. So inclusion refers to the marginalized communities, and while we work across the 10 African markets, we look at gender inclusion, but there's also a refugee lens as well. So we then launched this program in Uganda specifically, because Uganda, is the largest refugee hosting country in the continent. So it was just the best placed to be able to launch this program, learn from it, and then be able to see how we could scale it across the other markets. So because we are very interested in inclusive tech, and especially for marginalized communities, while we focus in gender in other markets, it was keen for us to make sure we also focus on refugees as well. And given the phenomena that's happening, especially right now, also with the climate change. So while we focus in Uganda, yes, we could say there are other countries in the continent that could also host refugees. Uganda not only being the highest, Uganda also has a very favorable open door policy, especially when it comes to rights to employment, which was key for us, health and education. So there's, as in Jobtech Alliance, we are very keen on sustainability. So that's a very key part of what we do. So we try to make sure that when we're launching these programs, which is now for Jobtech for Refugees, we had to set it up in an environment where it could thrive. So those rights to employment, health and education was key. And that's what made it very easy for us to plug into the Uganda side of things and then be able to set up the refugee program. Last but not least, we were also able to see that refugees, specifically in Uganda, are going through a lot of training. So there's a lot of skills training programs that are happening in Uganda. However, there is a big gap when it comes to the placement of the refugees. So yes, they have been able to maybe get these skills, but then how do we then make them sure that they can be able to improve their livelihood through jobs? So where is the part where we can place them so that they can have a sustainable and improved livelihood? So that's where we saw a gap, and we saw that we could be able to plug in and be able to have the program in Uganda.
Great, thanks, Brenda. I think as we're having kind of like this conversation and discussion, if the team actually has questions, you can type it on chat and then we can go back to it later on. So to my panel, we've had an interesting year and a half. And lots of learning. So I kind of like want to start with Simon. What do you think are some of the key learnings we've had in the last year and a half? And like, we keep hearing people talking about skills or a skills gap. Like, what do you think are the skills that are essential to be able to thrive in this digital economy, but also why are these some of the skills trying to get challenging?
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'll start with the question on the challenges and then the skills, and then I'll go to the lessons learned with the work that we're actually doing here at the African Youth Action Network, and also engaging the refugee-led, the different refugee-led organizations and the refugees themselves. So in terms of these skills, first is that when you are engaging these refugees, you need to make sure that the refugees that you are engaging actually understand some of their platform. So they need to actually have basic literacy skills. They need to actually know how to navigate the internet. They also need to be able to actually familiarize themselves with different softwares that are used by the different platforms that we actually engage in. And then there's also like the need for someone to actually have the proficiency, the language proficiency skills, because some of the platform requires you to actually have good command of the language, of the English language. And given that these are refugees that are coming from, some of them are coming from non-English speaking countries, French speaking countries. So they have to actually, these are people that have just been learning some of these skills. Maybe they have gone through 3 months skills, 6 months skills program on English, and then now they are trying to actually transition to English from French, which makes it very hard for them to actually write and actually write a very good essay, or even help in maybe working on some of these platforms. The other thing is for them even to engage with the different platforms, because now that is work. It's now a work opportunity. These refugees also need to actually have engagement skills, like professional skills, like that can help them to engage on this platform. Are they able to write very well the nice report? Are they even able to design a very good graphic? Are they able to edit a video? Are they able to code? Are they able to actually do data analysis, basic data analysis, for them to actually be able to engage? And then soft skills, like how are they able to even communicate in case they have like a challenge, they have a problem with the platform? Are they able to communicate to a refugee-led organization like the African Youth Action Network? Or are they able to reach out to YARI? Or are they able to reach out to the different platform? Because last year and also at the beginning of the year, we had some young people that were actually engaged that got some gigs. But then they were like, I think we cannot be able to actually manage some of these skills. And then they kept it to themselves until when the teams reach out and say, you know what, I think let us also get to understand and learn from these different refugees that we're actually working with. What are they struggling with? How are they able to actually cope up with the work? Is there anything that we can actually, maybe a challenge that we can actually help them with? Then they started opening up. They said, no, we needed this skill, we needed this, and then we were also not confident. Now, when they were taken through a training, a skill building training on how they can use the different platforms, how they can actually navigate through the internet and do basic design. Some of them were like, you know what, even I wish I knew that I can use Canva to actually do some of the designs. There was a job that I was given by actually, I dropped it because I didn't know how that I could actually use Canva. But what if this young person actually had reached out for more support? Are they reached out? Are they communicated to their platform? Are they communicated to maybe our project lead here? When they will actually be able to be guided. So soft skills are really very essential when we're actually making sure that we try to get jobs for these young people who are actually getting online jobs platform. The other thing is, the last one which I will talk about on the skill is understanding this different platform. Are they able to navigate some of this platform? Are they able to even understand, to find what they're looking for? Are they even able to actually find a job opening if a platform is actually having some job openings? And then through our engagement, we also experience some few challenges here and there. One of them is on documentation. As we all know, refugees struggle with the kind of document that they do have. Some of them have refugee IDs, some of them they don't have the refugee IDs, some of them they are in one family attestation, and then the attestation actually, maybe some of these documents are actually not recognized on this different platform. I'll give you one key example here. When we try to engage refugee drivers, we found there were so many of them, but some of them were using the permits from their countries of origin, either from South Sudan, either from Congo, or from Somalia. Some of them had expired permits. Some of them were not even able to actually produce the IDs and also some of these permits. So documentation is a challenge, it's a big challenge when we are trying to actually engage some of these refugees to actually get gigs and some jobs here. The other thing is gadget and actual access to internet. You'll find that the phones, and the phones that these people are actually using are either of low version or even of small space. So when they try to even download some of these platforms, the spaces are not enough, and then they are not able to actually download the platform, the apps of this platform. They are not able to create an account. They're not able to actually engage because of the kind of the gadget. The other thing is also access to internet. So unless someone has actually a very steady internet, that's when they can actually be able to perform and do some jobs online. And then participants also face challenges while navigating some of these platforms. I would like to actually say thanks to the Rousey team, not because Richard is here, but Rousey, I think, is the one of the platforms that really has, it's very easy for the refugees to actually engage. They gave a lot of feedback that it's friendly platforms, and also the rates actually are very fair for the refugees that we're actually engaging with. And then it's very easy for them to download on some of their phone. And then it requires minimum requirement and minimum paperwork or minimum documents that for them to actually create an account. The other challenge we also face as a refugee-led organization is while doing the registration, sometimes they upload this document, and then it takes a lot of time for the approval process to actually be done. Then this gives room for refugees now to start questioning, are these things even real? They begin now questioning them because they were not trusting some of these places before. They're not trusting that they can actually get work online, actually be able to actually work in their own homes or in their own neighborhood. So when there is that delay, they keep asking questions, and then because of the expectation that are actually high, it will also give us a lot of time that you need to go back and explain to them and tell them, you know what, it's going to take a lot of some time, but let's actually all be able to let us be able to actually wait. So the learnings that I will just mention, three key learning, and then I'll give it to the next. One is for us to actually keep having ongoing support to refugees. We found that it's very important for us to provide continuous support to individuals that are actually onboarded on this platform until they are able to actually independently navigate. They also understand, they are able to actually do everything on their own. So until when we know that, okay, they have succeeded and they are now engaged, they are part of the community, they are part of the platform, then we can actually say, you know what, okay, let's give them maybe a time to actually breathe. But before and then, we need to continue mentoring them, we need to continue supporting them, we need to continue asking questions, we need to continue asking them and providing them the necessary support. The other thing we also look at is like, if we're providing training, let us have it a comprehensive one. We should not have training, okay, this platform is coming and they want to make sure that, okay, refugees know how to take very nice photos, they know how to do this, they know how to edit this. But if we're able to actually provide a comprehensive training that also caters on the soft skills, on their professional skills, and also the language, it will also be very strong instrumental and actually helpful to the refugees when they're actually engaging on these different platforms. The third lesson that actually we learned as an organization is that it is very important for us to collaboratively work together, review together, to be able to actually sit down and analyze some of these problems and solve it as a community, refugee-led organizations, the Jobtech Alliance members, and also the different platforms. Can we be able to actually come together and say, you know what, we have a problem here with identification. Are we able to actually maybe push for some of these identification requirements to be reduced, to be minimal, to even be scrapped off, so that we can actually have refugees that are actually joining this platform, that are actually engaging, that are actually enrolling in some of these platforms that we really want to be working with. So collaboratively solving the problem as a team is also very important. And lastly is making sure that we actually have a stakeholder, constant and stakeholder engagement. Here, we as a refugee-led organization, we've been able to actually engage different the refugee community leaders and also the influencers, because refugees actually trust more their leaders than platforms or than the organization like ours. So they trust their leaders. When their leader actually say, you know what, I think this is a good platform for you to also try, it is very easy for them to actually start opening up. Even in families, when you don't engage the family heads, some of these refugees might be hard for us to even get them because their family will not allow them to use this internet or to use some of this phone, because they may think, they are maybe engaging now online, maybe they are committing crimes or they are also doing other things online, which the parents actually do not understand. So engaging the community at every stage is also very important. Thank you so much, and back to you, Michelle.
Great, thanks, Simon. And you brought a lot of information and like insights on like why scale is important. You've talked about trust being a key issue and also like training. I guess, to you, Richard, because you've had to do all these things and kind of creating trust. I guess like quick question for me, like Razi as a digital platform, what made you get into deciding like refugees is a sector you want to engage in, but then more importantly, then what has been your lessons in the last year as we engage with refugees in Uganda?
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Simon. Why? So simple reason, pretty much goes back to the core of what Razi began at in the first place. Apart from the lingering difficulty of access to information across the African market, which I believe most people who have tried to do anything across Africa can attest to. It's so difficult to get reliable data. The other one was, how do we create employment? As you can imagine, there's over 200 million young people that have graduated across the continent, but the jobs don't match the numbers. So we came up with a brilliant idea of building a network of community of mappers that are generally consumers of products and services that businesses are really pretty much interested in. So that way we're able to engage them in data collection activities. Once verified, then they can earn some form of payment or earnings. And I think that the refugee piece just fitting right into what we're doing. It wasn't such a hard bargain, if I'm being honest, in terms of why we were doing what we're doing, but also the impact after, given that there's such, especially for Uganda, like Brenda mentioned, there's such a there's a higher number of refugees across Uganda than the rest of Africa. So the why is pretty much that we have a keen desire or vision to be able to create employment opportunities for young people scattered across Africa, but also pretty much spreading across the globe, as the problems are pretty much the same around unemployment. So it's an easy way of an individual being able to share their experiences, but also to contribute to the impact of even bigger brands across the continent or across the world, depending on what data mapping activities we have running in different markets. So that's pretty much the why. The learnings have been very interesting. And I think when we started out, the assumption was that it would be super straightforward because the model is built on a freelance practice where individuals that are interested in being part of the platform can onboard themselves and be able to navigate the platform. We have managed to have it translated across major languages across the world, so it's easy for individuals to sort of like know what's going on. But the experience was slightly different, that even after meeting the pilot cohort, it was still a challenge to help I guess individuals understand, or the refugees understand the mechanism of the gig economy space. Because for a lot of them, the assumption was you kind of like have some form of steady job similar to a 9-to-5. And I guess it's something leaning towards job security as opposed to have something that they're not too sure of it will be available 3 months down the road. But given that our gigs coexist with our onboarding of new clients, there is that bit of uncertainty. So we quickly learned that we needed to create some form of assurance. And I remember, Michelle, when we were starting some of these conversations, there were a lot of discussions around how do we build demand in form of creating more clients within these markets, specifically for Uganda, to be able to sustain the supply of work across the refugee community. So that was very key for us to learn in just helping them now understand, okay, this is how the gig economy works. There are short-term engagements, you kind of have to wrap your head around that. But also we had to learn that not everybody can pace themselves to do the work. You know, people need a lot of hand-holding. They need to kind of like be supported, similar to what Simon was alluding to earlier in terms of providing mentorship and support. And I think we've had to learn that that is a very key thing to enable them. And I guess it makes sense given that if you're in a new location where you're sort of like trying to find yourself and create some form of sustainable living, it would be nice to have some hand-holding. So, but also we quickly had to learn that people are really interested in higher earning gigs or higher earning payouts. And yet, so the way our model works is we kind of like do the compound effect. So you do a bunch of gigs over time, you accumulate a certain amount of money, there's minimums to every country, and you're able to withdraw that money as and when it's available for you based off the cap within the market you come from. Some markets are lower than others. And those are more logistical issues that are happening across the continent in terms of remittances. So quickly we had to understand that, you know, there was need to figure out how do we create opportunities that are slightly fitting to the desired or that would make sense to the individuals within the refugee space. And I know we're working alongside Brenda and the team at Mercy Corps to, you know, kind of revamp our entire understanding of the onboarding process. What does conversion look like? And then just be able to be present at all the milestones that we've identified within getting the refugees onboarded into the platform, but also getting to make sure that they actually work and benefit from that experience, which is obviously slightly different from the way we would ordinarily do the onboarding for the rest of the mappers across the globe, because it's pretty much self-paced, and we encourage a lot of self-drive, which speaks for us. Some of the underlying things that people learn from this experience is they are able to boost their confidence. Some of the soft skills that Simon is talking about, a lot of our mappers within the community have developed those skills through actually engaging in mapping activities, because then they're able to engage with new people, or they're able to speak to other individuals and take part in certain activities. So I'll stop here for now, but I think those are pretty much a good representation of some of our challenges and learnings.
Thanks, Richard. Mike, you're also like in an interesting sector for like creative economy. So either all the soft skills that someone has talked about and all the challenges and trust, how has been your experience as WOWSY in this space?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think for us, it's been very interesting exploring this opportunity. I think our excitement was around just the inclusivity that this whole concept of refugees would bring to our platform. It's the same thing with our previous sprints, which was pretty much trying to increase women in our platform, etc. So that was, if I think about it, the main motivation was to make our platform more diverse. At the same time, try to have a stab at that opportunity to solve the refugee crisis. So our model is quite interesting. It's initially we thought it's a low barrier to entry, because all you need is a phone and lights to create content. But I guess when we started engaging with the refugee community, we realized a bunch of things that we needed to think about. I think one of the things is this issue of identification, which, you know, pretty much everybody has an ID. And the way our platform is able to run campaigns in, I think, 23 countries now, is we need to KYC individuals automatically. So a lot of the times we're integrated to the country registries of the various countries. So we need to check to verify that indeed you are who you say you are. Because in our world, if you think about it, there's also a lot of robots, or bots, as they call them, who pretend to be humans, and they are commenting, but really so the trust that brands have with WOWSY is because we are able to do rigorous KYC on all the influencers joining. But when you think about a typical refugee, not all of them have these documents for various reasons. So the onboarding becomes a bit not as easy. And sometimes we pretty much have to do manual KYC to make it feasible to be able to have them onboarded nicely. So that was one challenge. The other challenge is not all of them have built their social profiles. So we found within the Wowzy platform, we have a minimum entry, which is each person to begin earning as a content creator needs to have 250 followers, which when we were designing Wowzy, we thought more or less everybody has 250 followers. We thought it was like a very low bar. But then you find, you know, someone comes and they say, you know, I've never created a Facebook account. I'm just starting out, you know. So how do we think about even a lower threshold without losing the value proposition, which is our platform is almost like media. You need to reach more people for the brands to find value in using you as a content creator, because that's what they're paying for. They're really paying for visibility, for the trust you have between yourself and friends. So I think that was another challenge that we faced specifically, which was, you know, finding people who are just starting out, they haven't built out their social profiles. Therefore, you need to start slightly earlier when you're thinking about enrolling them. And then that brings to the question of digital literacy or skills, which again, beyond what we were doing, which was very light touch. If you think about our typical core client, our core customer, if you may, the users, content creators, most of the time, they already have some level of awareness and skill around digital. They have accounts, they know how to create content, they have apps that they use to edit and so on and so forth. So we found that these things that we thought were obvious needed to be included in a wider curriculum as we train the guys. And we even realized beyond even training them, we might need to bring in more seasoned content creators to do practical sessions with them. So, you know, I show you, here's a Coca-Cola, we are doing this ad, this is how to place it, this is where the lighting is coming from, this is the best time to post because of various reasons, this is how to engage your audience. There's a lot of technical skills that we needed to, you know, instill in the refugees. And then finally, I think it's the demand itself, as Rosie has also mentioned. Demand is very sporadic for gig platforms, you know, and that's the truth for even the brands we work with. So you might find it's Christmas season and everybody's running campaigns, so there's a lot of work versus right now in Kenya, there are riots, so everybody's like, I don't want to be associated with anything. Stop all the campaigns. So it's very sporadic. So how do we think about ways to ensure that there's more consistency in the work that we're producing, and that the gig workers, in this case, refugee workers, have opportunity? And one of the things we've thought about is this concept that we are introducing, and I hope it catches up, and this concept of creators for good. We're getting a lot of demand from the social sector, particularly, to have content creators speak on issues on governance, issues of climate change, issues of, you know, opportunities for refugees. So social sector allocating campaign budgets to the refugees, or that's a big opportunity. We've also seen another big opportunity around misinformation, which is another big demand area where, you know, every so often there's a lot of content that is false, sometimes even AI generated. So we could use refugees as people who either call this out or identify or point people to the right message. And we think if we complement the commercial campaigns that we're doing with social campaigns, then you're able to bridge those gaps of opportunity when one sector is dry, there's another sector that has opportunity. So yeah, there's high level, those are some of the challenges that we faced and how we think we can be able to solve them.
Great. Thanks, Mike. And as usual, very interesting, guys. I always talk about this. But something both of you have mentioned that is interesting, and coming back to the question Camila has actually asked on chat. Both of you have mentioned on the support that's needed on the refugees to be able to get them. And it's a question of like, do you have to do it one-on-one? Mike, you mentioned having like a mentor-ish, someone to come in and help them think about what's the right time to post, what are you able to do? And similar like with Richard, like how to take photos. That's quite hard if you have to do like each individual refugee. So how do you scale that so that you're able to reach more people in a way that, yeah, it's sustainable also for like the organization?
Yeah, maybe I can start. I think the parallel I can think of is a program that we pretty much went 360 was when we tried to work with farmers and turn them into influencers. And that was quite interesting because it's similar. It's people who in their day, they're in the farm, but here you're trying to tell them that, you know, you can sell your avocados on Facebook, you know, and that was like, before you take someone from level one to the other, there are a few things that we learned. I think one was the training needed to be hybrid. And by hybrid, I mean elements of it were physical. For sure, you need to put everybody in a room and do a lot of physical sessions. But at the same time, we figured out ways to do digital trainings. So for example, we would go to a place, convene all the farmers and do a whole day of fun content creation. But then when we leave, we have all of them in a WhatsApp group where somebody can actually go and create a video of an avocado and load it on WhatsApp and ask guys, what do you think? So we saw a very interesting peer-to-peer learning model that started coming up, where if someone saw what someone else did, it became more and more interesting. Yeah. So that was one level. The second level was this idea of trainers of trainers. In the case of the farmers, we realized that actually, because of their age, the best way was finding a son or a daughter that they had who was very good at this already. Yeah. So we started matching them and, you know, help dad do X, Y, Z. Then we realized actually everybody in their radius has someone younger who was born in the digital world anyway. So they started working with their parents, and that peer-to-peer really helped. And then within the group, we also had actual influencers. Like we even had some big celebrities who came in and they were bringing in credibility and excitement because some of them will be people they watched on Citizen TV or actors they knew. So it gave them that extra excitement and confidence to learn this new skill, seemingly. Yeah? And a combination of that hybrid learning, we started seeing better results in the content, but it took time. It wasn't like, you know, touch and go. It was a 6 to 8 month, to be honest, if not a 2-year activity before we started to see, you know, some of them actually creating the level of content that was required to get impact. Yeah.
Interesting. Richard?
Very interesting. So I'll talk about what we're trying to do now, because initially, or our approach has always been, how do we create a fully automated experience for the users, because it allows easier scalability. So, I mean, people can have access to, especially the consumers as mappers on the platform, can have access to information localized to their, you know, in their languages. And so one of the things we're doing is we've built an AI support tool on the platform. So within the app, We introduced Ella, who we are making everybody's best friend, and pretty much the goal there is to allow Ella support people the best way they understand how. So while ordinarily would get an email come through a support email thread asking from someone in Kaduna asking in Pidgin, where our support team, part of them are Ugandans, Kenyans, maybe South Africa, who probably never understand half what page, if you asked me a question about what do I do in Pidgin, I have no idea. Ella would be able to pick it up and provide a more suitable answer and sort of like point them to the right direction within the platform of what they really need. So that's one where we're trying to provide as much support as we possibly can. We did try the in-person support in terms of training, and I think we specifically did this with the first cohort in Uganda for the refugees. And it was exciting. I mean, it's always exciting in person when you see, and I think at that time we had running gigs. So it was exciting to see people in the room, do simple tasks and, see the money reflect in their wallets. And it was exciting to see that go on. But I guess the challenge was then when they were by themselves. One of the challenges we found is that I don't know if it is, I guess we would have to really think about this a bit more, Brenda. If it was a point of someone being shy to ask a question, that they're failing to do something because of ABCD in a larger group, because I mean, there was a whole WhatsApp group set up and making sure, and they were attached like a whole support person from our team to make sure that, they're being supported. But also we realized that, so we have a very strict data quality verification process. So at the very beginning, a lot of the new users would find themselves, especially if you don't follow, because people think, oh, this is really quick money, we can just do ABCD. But if you don't do it right, you won't be able to earn to earn the money. But you've spent a lot of time, you've probably walked to the shops and whatnot. So that level of demoralization sometimes pushes people away, even though we have a lot of training support within the app. So what now we're doing is automating as much as possible the verification process, so that as you're running the activity of data collection, the system is able to pull up anything that does not match what is required and stop you in that moment. So then you do the right thing. So you're prompted to do the right thing. So we hope that in the next couple of months, we would have completed that cycle of automation, especially around image verification and a bunch of other things, again, to allow a more scalable solution, given that we are running multiple projects across various countries and across various mappers. But I also think even for the upcoming new cohorts with refugees, this will be a very helpful solution to help them learn, but also because also what the tool will do will point them to a training material that now will support them and provide them with the right information. Okay, you're taking the photo really in the wrong way. Could you consider reviewing this resource and see how a good photo is taken, so that then the person can make reference without rushing and they do the right thing. So those are a couple of things that we're really looking forward to. And the other things that I think we spoke earlier today, Brenda, around working with some of the leaders from the refugee community and see how best we can support them, since they have more contact time with the refugees. And we think if they're able themselves to understand in completeness of how the platform performs, they can pass on that level of support easily before it is escalated, depending on whether it's a technical or whatever issue. So we think that might be also a very helpful solution. Yeah, over to you, Michelle.
Yeah, and I think that model then creates trust, right? If you're using the people they know within the community, and someone has also mentioned that, like having people who refugees know as part of it and kind of having that as whole ecosystem. And I guess, yeah, you've talked about like onboarding, but also a bit of retention. Maybe Simon, because you worked with the refugees longer, when they joined the platforms, because I know we've worked with you at several platforms, how has been the retention been? Are they been there for longer? Do they do one job and disappear? Do they even do their first job? What happens? Because yeah, I think the key question people have, if I'm going as a platform, going to spend a lot of money on training, I want to also kind of see the results. So what has been that experience?
So over the course of the year, we have been able to work with different platforms, up to about 7 or 8 platforms on at different occasions and also at different times. And I would say that I think the retention rate has really been very low. It has been less than 20% of the retention rate. Why has it been 20%? So at first our approach was, okay, a platform comes that has been like onboarded, and then we try to actually identify people. We have community sessions, and then we identify members that can actually pick interest, We train them on how they can actually navigate and use that platform, specifically for that platform. So you'll find that, okay, the first experience is, okay, the communities are like tough on these people. Like they're like, okay, I need to go and actually sell a product. They say if you are a Jumia JPOS agent, you need to go and sell a product. And then the refugees are like, okay, they are telling me that, okay, after maybe selling a certain amount of money, that's when I can actually be able to get this. And then they're like, no, for me, I cannot be doing this. Then I cannot only be doing this if the interest rate is actually high. So they look at the numbers at the start. So that is the first thing that actually propel, that's actually make them to want to sit back and say, I'm not engaging because these guys are asking for a lot from me, and actually the pay is actually very minimal. So they look at the percentage. How much am I going to get after selling? What commission am I going to get after selling this, after selling that, or after selling this other one? The other one is I will give an example of Collaborate. So there were like 6 young people that got jobs, that got gigs on this platform. But then because of also their self-esteem, they look at the work and say, you know what, I'm not able to actually perform this. I'm not actually able to do this. I think this is beyond me. I cannot be able to actually design something like this one here. So which really requires, and that's what actually Chad and Maya actually said, it's also very important for us to have someone support such an individual, and you say, you know what, this is something that you can actually do. So if there is maybe a refugee, because I think one of the concern is if we're dealing with individuals, is it not going to be time consuming for the institution? Is it not going to be like a lot? How are we going to be actually scale it up? So when we look at the first 10 or the first 5 people that we train, can they then be able to actually mentor other refugees themselves? Can they be able to actually work with other people? If someone is paired with another refugee or 2, so that they can actually be taking them on a daily basis on how they can even be able to design, how they can actually be able to communicate, they're telling how they can be able to take up jobs and gigs online. I think that way we can be able to scale. We will not need 1 or 2 people from the institution. We will not also be able to need someone from the institution actually following them up on the. So what I would say is the retention rate has been very low, and then the experiences has actually been varying from one platform to the next.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And I've seen, Steven also on chat saying this kind of the same thing, kind of like being challenging. Brenda, I know we've spent time thinking about, so how do we enable to get refugees ready for online work? What are kind of like some of the key learnings we've had? Is it easy? I know there's a question on what's the scale? Is it like, do we give opportunities to all refugees at once, or should we actually have targeted? So I'll give you a few minutes kind of like to share with us some of the learnings Jobtech Alliance have had.
Thank you. So I'm so pleased actually also by the panel, because these are people that we work with all the time in trying to make this work. So we've got a lot of learnings from the different panelists, and we've been able to come up with an approach that we have not yet implemented, but we are aiming to make sure we start implementing it as of next month. So I'm going to take you through that approach. But there are 3 things I want us to take home from the lessons that we have learned, because all the lessons that everyone on the panel has shared, we have learned together on this journey, and it has been quite difficult, but we believe it's still possible. So that's key. And on top of everything they've added, I want to add just 3 key lessons that I would like everyone on this call to get is one solution fits all. That has been the theme in all that we have been doing. And that's one key insight that has come up in the refugee space, that we tend to have one solution or one way of thinking for all the refugees, but we have realized segmentation and cohorts is a very key thing. I like that Richard mentioned, the person who's shy in the room who can't ask a question. That's because we are creating situations where we have all refugees, regardless of what skill set they are, if they are urban, if they are from the settlement, all in one room, learning from the same way, which is just very unsustainable and also makes it quite difficult to do. So in the approach I'm going to walk you through, you will see we're trying as much as we can to use cohorts, which really improve and make it a more customer-centric approach. Trying to make sure you understand where the person is in the user journey for refugees, from when the settlements to urban area, because those are quite different. Skill mapping, what is the skill set across, and just trying to understand that much better. Then we believe that through cohorts, we'll be able to improve the mindset change. So this is something we are borrowing from the Jobtech platforms we are working with across our whole ecosystem building initiative. We have learned that early adopters of any solution are a very key driver of a mindset change, especially when we're looking for disruptive, right? So in refugee space, there is need to do that. One, for the private sector. So the platforms we are working with, Razi, Wowzi, who are also on this call, if we have certain cohorts of refugees that are very ready to plug into these platforms, they should be able to plug into these platforms because they create a business case for the private sector, who then gets a buy-in and is then able to take on more refugees. But if we crowd all the refugees together, then you lose that segmentation, and there would be those who are actually early adopters who could plug in, don't need training or not need as many assets. They're already ready. They could be plugged in. And from there, different platforms would be impressed. The private sector would say, oh, wow, refugees actually can do this. And then it encourages the buy-in from their side, because all the private sector cares about really is the bottom line. So if you can prove that, that's something that we have noticed by showing the business case for refugees. That's something that really works. On the other side, besides the platforms, my cohorts and through early adopters or people who are ready to plug in, they also do the same for their communities. So we have noticed that word of mouth is very strong because communities are they trust each other. Once someone says this platform doesn't work, it sort of just sends a ripple effect to the whole community and people don't take on the platform. But once it works, you may not even need training for people to onboard onto a platform, because that platform just sells itself, because there's a very strong word of mouth due to the trust that that is within the refugee communities. So that's something we've also noticed in the work when we're doing the Jobtech placement. And that's something also that's key. So that's just something I wanted to add on to what everyone was saying just before I show you the new approach. So I'm just going to share my screen, and please let me know if you're able to see it. Basically, what we have done is, I like that also Richard mentioned it earlier, is we are trying to build the capacity for the refugee-led organizations and other delivery partners to be able to improve the recruitment process. So the recruitment process is something that is quite key for us to be able to place refugees onto platforms. So the support that I think everyone has been asking, that how do we scale that? That's something through this approach we are hoping to achieve. So just quickly through this is, we were able to identify with our partners like Simon from Ayan and also Yarid, we were able to identify in just 6 months, 450 refugees that could work on platforms that we had in our portfolio at the time. However, as Simon mentioned, there was a high churn rate. many refugees were dropping off and weren't able to take on the work that was going on because of different challenges. And so we had a very 25% retention rate, which was quite low. So what we came up with is an approach, the supply side funnel. And here you're able to see how we go through the steps by step. So stage 0 is the platform level. So before we even enter anything, we have to first ensure the platform has demand, has meaningful work, quality work, and also appeals to the refugee community. So those are things that we make sure we do at that stage 0. And that's something we'll do with Razi, with Wowzy, trying to make sure that is already ticked on. Once we do that, we then able to work with the refugee-led organizations to then identify. So these platforms have selection criteria. So one platform will say, we need them to have a working laptop, or we need them to have a smartphone, different things that they need, or identification, different criteria. So we make sure we have that with a platform and then be able to draft an outreach strategy. So at first, we were not being as targeted or intentional when we were doing the outreach. We'd just go to the communities and reach out to them and tell them, come on, let's go. There's a platform. Are you interested? But now we are trying to make it more targeted so that we get those cohorts, those very quality cohorts, so that then we can scale it after we learn from those first cohorts. Then the vetting comes into the stage 2. So vetting, once we have identified the refugees based on the skill set and the criteria, then we're able to vet. Vetting only needs two things here. This is where we register. So a vetting is needed to have verification. So Simon mentioned things like documentation. Some things expired. We need to vet that. There's also things around some platforms require certain things like a certain operating system or things like that. So we sort of just verify and make sure that's in line. And then the last thing I want us to capture is the cohort. So when in the vetting, the cohorts I mentioned about, this is where the cohorts would sit. So we'd have a cohort that's 100% ready with no needed support or anything, that's ready to plug into the platform. And we have found cohorts like that. They actually exist, and they're in Kampala. They're urban refugees who have been here for quite some time. We also have a second cohort that is 50% higher when it comes to the readiness. So we noticed that as long as you're 50% and above ready to plug into the platform, you enter the second cohort. 50% could mean you have a smartphone, for example, for Razi. It's working, it's going on well. However, maybe the operating system has an issue. So it's something that just requires a bit of some fix, but not necessarily a lot of intervention. The third cohort which requires a lot of intervention is the one that goes below the 50%. So that is the third cohort. And so that's the needs assessment that we mean here in the vetting. And those 3 cohorts require different interventions. So mapping that out also is very helpful and makes it quite sustainable for platforms and the RLOs to plan accordingly on how to do this. Then the onboarding comes in next, which is generally just the enrollment of the refugees onto the platform. So we onboard them, but always the ones who are 100% will always be plugged in quite quickly, because remember, we're trying to make sure we can get early adopters, get very good success stories from them using the platform, so that we can then utilize those stories and also get learnings from the first cohort so that we implement that in the next cohorts. Conversion, I think you can all see, is the key thing here. Conversion is basically, when do they start working? So conversion for us as Jobtech Alliance is, what is the 1 month? So the 1 month, they have to be actually working and doing and completing those tasks on the platform to be able to say that we have converted. So mentorship and support is where this is needed in the first month. And as I say, depending on the cohort, the kind of mentorship and support is different, right? Then retention, as what is required in Jobtech, we have a job criteria per platform. And so, for example, we would say in Razi, mappers who are on the platform who have worked for 3 months and have earned $30 per month in the 3 months, that is a job. So that would now be retention. So First month would be conversion. Second month, we now start noticing, okay, this refugee cohort is doing quite well. They're in the second month. That kind of support would change. It would maybe become monthly as compared to weekly. It would become a monthly support. So maybe through group activities, engagements, focus group, trying to get feedback so that we can learn what worked, what didn't work, to help make sure they retain on the platform in the third month. And we could also pass those learnings to the next cohort so that we have a higher chance of success. So these are the 6 steps and the 6 parts that we have in our funnel. We are, as I said, we're going to implement it with Simon and his team, and also Yarid, who is our other partner, and also other delivery partners as well that we'll work with. So we are hoping this works. So it will iterate. We are trying to make sure we learn as fast as we can. We will iterate based on the results that we get. And we'll also be working with platforms like Razi to implement this also next month and also August. So we'll share our learnings from that as well.
Great, thanks, Brenda. Yeah, and I'm sure we're going to do a lot more like learnings and sharing out with people. So thank God to this presentation, like with Migration Summit, we can be able to do much more. But you can see like there's a lot of things that we still have to do, and we're learning. There are a couple of questions that I've seen on the channel, and I'll start asking people to answer them. I think there's a question for Richard and Mike on actually how do you remunerate refugees on the platform? We keep hearing about payments being a challenge. How are you able to do that? And I guess Richard.
I think for Uganda it's pretty easy because documentation is it's probably not as easy as straightforward, but it's easier than other markets for refugees to get documentation to be able to access their money. But for us, it's very simple. One of the things we've integrated is mobile money, which is really widely used across so many countries in Africa. And basically, you can easily move your money from the wallet in the app straight to any mobile money account of your choosing. So that's like, it's like a very quick move or easy process. We're trying to, I mean, there are other methods like bank transfer, but very few people use bank transfers, especially in cash-led economies. People prefer to have their cash as opposed to have it in the bank. So mobile money is like the most widely used platform. Yep.
Okay. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, so I think a bunch of ways. I think as we were talking, Michelle, one of the things I said is pretty much the need of tooling. So we find that a difference in fonts, for example, makes a huge difference on the quality of your photo or how you create content. So I think for me, it's still at those fundamental levels, figuring out how we can be able to find tooling partners. So we've been able, for example, to get into a partnership with the likes of Techno and them to begin and finding the right partners to have subsidized phones that can be able to be issued out to this demography. So I think that's one initiative that we are pursuing to make sure that not only are the refugees skilled, but also the tools are important in our world to make sure that, they are not at a disadvantage. And then the second thing we're also introducing, which will also be helpful, and this is in partnership with different telcos, is once someone has those tools, then the other need is data. So the idea of connectivity, right? So we are introducing Wowzy Bundle, which will be heavily subsidized compared to, what's in the market, which means the content creators can then have access to connectivity. I think there's an interesting project that we're also introducing beyond the telcos with Starlink, which is to say areas where the connectivity is not available through fiber or telco masts. Could we work with Starlink to do connectivity? And this is something we're actually testing in different markets to see, if someone has the tools, the skills, and then the connectivity, they are all of a sudden you're making them able to access or take advantage of these opportunities than in the past. So those initiatives are things we are doing in parallel, and we'll also introduce them in Uganda to see, could it drive more adoption? Could it make it easier? And will we be able to get better outcomes based on them?
Hey, thanks, Mike. Brenda, actually, the next question is for you. Like, what Jobtech platforms are most used by refugees in Uganda? And I guess I'll encourage the participants to keep typing the questions, and we'll try to answer them as much as possible. Yeah, and are they able, and then are refugees able to find work through them consistently?
Yeah, so that's actually a good question because it's part of our learnings as well. So Jobtech, we have a taxonomy of 5 key platforms that we look at. So digitally delivered work is basically what we are focusing on for this panel session, but we have other taxonomies as well. So the one that we have learned that a lot of refugees are plugging into quite easily, and also the retention is generally higher, is the digital platforms for offline work. So for example, if you have like a ride hailing platform, so what that means is you get the work online, but then you perform the service or the job offline in a nutshell. So any platform that's like that, we have noticed that there's a very, very high uptake of such platforms when it comes to refugees. And we have realized it's mostly because of the skill set. So you'll find that refugees are a lot in, when it comes to, you know, ride hailing, for example, being able to ride bikes. There's a big community in Uganda among the refugees who is able to do this. And this is what they do. When it comes to things like plumbing, or it comes to beauty as well, the beauty industry, we know, and there is a lot of refugees who are able to do that. So it makes sense that this is a taxonomy that would drive a lot. There's also digital services for micro enterprises. That's the other. And these kinds of platforms have also done quite well. And what this means is you have a business, but then there is a platform that can enhance your business. So for example, we can look at Jumia. We can also look at Market by Momo. So these e-commerce platforms, we have a lot of refugee communities that are in retail, for example. And so all they need is a platform, a Jobtech platform, to plug into their existing business and enhance and grow their business. So being on an e-commerce platform, for example, will give them additional market, additional income. And also for these platforms, they love this because it also improves their acquisition. So these 2 platforms have done really well. And then, of course, the platforms we've been talking about in this session, which is the digitally delivered work. So they are refugees who are unable to do a lot of, you know, steady, having to be in one place. So they won't be, like, example, in a retail, in a shop the whole day. And even while they're in the shop, they would want additional streams of income. So gig work comes in really well because there's additional streams of income, and also there's flexibility, which is what many of these refugees need, because some of them have to stay home, or they do not have enough facilitation to do transport and all that. So they'd rather just sit, be on their phone, and be able to complete a task or something that they need to do. So these 3 are quite popular. Just to answer your question, these are the 3 taxonomies that do quite well. And actually, as a program, these are our high priority when it comes to pipelining platforms in Uganda, which are able to provide work for refugees. Have I answered?
Yes, but I've also put another additional point there that, yeah, when we went to Uganda, we actually thought we're going to see lots and lots of platforms. There are less platforms than what we anticipated. So as Jobtech Alliance, also we're encouraging anyone who wants to test out any Jobtech platforms want to test out new things in a new country, we can be able to actually help them and de-risk them by coming to Uganda. I know we're doing something fantastic, like with Equal Reach, bringing them to Uganda, and hopefully working with Namal to see like what opportunities are there, because we truly believe there is a market. It's just like how we encouraging more platforms also to get in. Andreas, maybe ask you for like a few words, because I know, and I've mentioned them all and like some of the things we've done.
Yes. Hi.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, listening to all this, was asked to be, in a way, a respondent or sort of bring in a few insights here. And I think, so just briefly, I work at the University of Edinburgh, and my own research as an anthropologist has been focused on refugee work in the digital economy since 2017. But I've also done work with the ILO, with UNHCR, trying to think through what an inclusive and well-protected digital economy actually means from the perspective of refugees. And so, I mean, there's so many things that I found extremely inspiring and interesting today, but there is not really enough time. But I thought it might be, as a first point, important to remember that there are different models, and we don't always make it clear that there are different models. So in terms of digital livelihoods for refugees, you could say the one model, for example, provides training for individuals in cohorts that then has the aim to connect them to the open marketplaces and platforms like Upwork or Fiverr, etc. And the idea is that they are incubated, and at some point they will leave the incubator and they will be freestanding and successful. And the other model is more like keep them incubated, in a sense that you have a cohort of workers that are continuously trained. They might be a few dozens or maybe even a few hundreds, and you have a social enterprise or an agency that acquires bigger projects, and they then distribute the work to the workers. But the pool of workers will basically, for a long time, be more or less stable. People will become gradually more experienced, and the field of work is specialized. Let's say it is focused on translation, or it is focused on AI annotations and so on. So just to say that I think these two models have different implications, and the second model, where you have much more influence on mitigating the negative effects of gig work. And I think major digital labor platforms, as we know, coming back to the dignified work aspect of the summit, are criticized in many ways for creating working conditions that are not in line with international labor standards and decent work standards. But of course, what is considered dignified in what place and by whom obviously is very different. So I think we need to be careful here. So I just wanted to say this brief thing about the two models. And then the other point was picking up on sort of trying to bring things together a little bit, because in my work I've tried to define different pillars of what an inclusive digital refugee economy requires. And I think we've definitely heard identification, but I also wanted to mention financial inclusion, which is linked to identification, where ID requirements such as KYC also prevent people from registering SIM cards in some cases. They also prevent people from opening mobile money accounts and from accessing bank accounts. Connectivity and the sort of infrastructure, I think that's the most obvious point. But I also wanted to mention affordability, which is obviously a major challenge. It doesn't, accessing a good expensive smartphone or computer remains a really big challenge for refugees. And the other three pillars I just wanted to highlight are, of course, the rights. I think a lot of the barriers we're seeing require improved rights for refugees more generally, including the right to work, the right to start a business, but also the right to recognized ID and regulations, such as KYC regulations, banking regulations, but outside of, maybe perhaps not so relevant in Uganda, but there are populations of refugees that are facing a blanket exclusion from platforms because of international sanctions. And that has affected Syrians, it has affected, I think, people from the Congo as well, and so on. And the other two pillars are cybercrime, of course, and digital risk. So I think we've briefly mentioned the lack of trust and fears about cybercrime and risks, and there's a really, really, really worrying movement that those exclusions that people are experiencing are forcing them to find workarounds that are not safe, such as using a broker, such as buying a second-hand platform account, pretending to be someone else on the internet, or having to, make use of host community members and citizens to receive money payments and then being ripped off and scammed. Of course, digital skills and capabilities are the last pillar I wanted to mention, but we've talked about that a lot, and I think that has been covered really well. So perhaps just as a little bit of a generalizing input from my side, a few notes.
No, Andreas, thank you. That is so great. And I can say, like with Jobtech Alliance, I think we actually use the second approach you've mentioned. And in the line of like answering Emmanuel's questions or like what measures being taken. I think we know platforms can offer good work also as well as bad work, right? So how do you ensure security and safety of migrants? And one of the things we're doing was like working with RLOs to enable us to kind of get consistent feedback. And I think like, because we're kind of like still in the learning phase, is making sure that we're able to learn as compared to like saying, oh, here are the platforms you can get in, but making sure that we're still hearing the voice of the refugees as we're continuing, because then we're able to either change or effect. With the model, I think Brent has mentioned, is because we learned, right? We said, okay, let's pause, let's take, reflect and everything. So with regards kind of like health and safety measures is important. And I think also like for the platforms we work with, as Jobtech Alliance, those are kind of like, at least they have to sign a contract saying they need to ensure that there's health and safety of the people on the platform. Because we truly believe that we need to offer good jobs, not just jobs. I guess maybe let's see if there's another question. We've talked about connecting Jobtech Alliance, how we contract. There's a question, I don't know, maybe any of you can answer. If there are any platforms today that also focus on Web3 gigs as well. Not in Uganda, I can say, but other platforms you're seeing in Africa, somewhere else. So I can share that with you. I guess if there's no other question, I will have like final comments from.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Sorry, I always get to intervene because I'm one of the hosts. So not just in terms of refugees, but in terms of in general, what do you think is the biggest challenge that platforms in Africa are facing in terms of job creation? And so not particularly refugees, but in general.
We have platforms on the line, so they should answer that question. So
yes,
Richard.
Please, platforms. I want to know what's the biggest.
Yeah, let them answer, then I can kind of conclude with what we're seeing as Jobtech Alliance or Brenda. So what are some of the challenges you've seen platforms in Africa?
Oh, I'll go first and then maybe Mike. I think for us, it has been the different legal nitty-gritties across the continent. We're not, like East Africa has some form of similarity. Then there's the SADC for Southern Africa. You have the West African as well. It's all different. So when you want to do something, some countries have different policies on data privacy, different policies on remittances. That's why we have varying, varying pricing points for different markets. Some markets are more expensive than others. Some markets are not entirely, like when we did some tests, they were not entirely interested in doing the work. Like would have very good gigs, but nobody would touch it. And it was considered to be extremely low in terms of earning. And yet if you brought the same gigs to, let's say, Uganda, Kenya, and Nigeria, people would be super excited because those would be really, really good paying gigs. So South Africa is in that category where I'm like, it's not gonna work for me. Or an interesting one was actually Mauritius as well. It was just, we're not, we just need more earnings, which, it's been a very interesting challenge, just being able to figure out different solutions or different provisions in terms, offerings actually is the word, in terms of, the different markets across them. But pretty much the core has been the different legal needs for different markets, and, the remittance. I wish we had one unique platform to run remittances across Africa. I think it would solve so many different problems, but yeah, it's just, there's like so many things going on. So those are some of the things that I guess working across Africa we're trying to face really.
And I guess maybe as Jobtech, kind of key challenges you've seen platform facing, one big challenge is demand generation. And platforms, I think Africa has an oversupply of supply side and people and workers. You can see all this increment of like unemployment rate and everything, but for platforms to work, they need to actually have demand. Some demand might be within the continent. Most demand are coming from the global north, as much as possible. And I can give an example, like Razi has a whole sales team in the US trying to get demand for actually African work. We're seeing a couple of our platforms as well, trying to have either using LinkedIn or actually hiring people within either European markets or the US market to kind of try to get a lot of demand for African workers. So that kind of we see as interesting. And I guess the second challenge we've had, and some of it has been spoken about today, is the skills mismatch between what's needed on the platform and what's actually out there. And not only the platforms, we're seeing even the refugee space, but generally with regards to a lot of the platforms, that's one of the key things is like, even if you went to education and did, okay, sorry, a couple of things are popping up. And you did like computer science. What we've seen platforms do is like do another retraining to be able actually to place them, especially the placing them to global north or companies in Europe. And that was for us like interesting, like how do we make sure that people are skilling for the right things? And I think there's a whole conversation of future of work as being, we need to actually be able to have the skill sets for the future, which is all the digital skills, but also how do you adapt as quickly as possible and be able to support? I guess, hopefully I've answered your question, Lorraine.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I was thinking about, these challenges. And thanks, Richard, for that. Financial inclusion was discussed quite a lot in a panel we had yesterday. And there was one person who came on the chat and the session said he's developing a payment system for payments all over Africa. So I'll keep you posted, because I've been hearing this so many times that financial inclusion is a huge problem, and certainly for refugee populations, we try different solutions every month, because what we can do one month doesn't often work the next month. Anyone in the audience, we have time for one question. Any more questions? Please feel free to either unmute or just write it in the chat. I think we've addressed most of the challenge. Okay, Kamal.
Yeah, thank you very much, and everyone, and I'm just super glad to be part of this conversation. And yeah, maybe I can just comment. I'm a refugee currently living in Uganda. And I'm a data scientist or machine learning engineer, and one of the key problems that people face in Uganda is just, and when doing job research or you're at the interview, and yeah, most of the employers don't recognize a refugee ID or an equivalent to that, and so and if they see that, it's like a pass on them. And yeah, so that's to be honest, like that's a big problem that maybe refugees looking for work in Uganda or maybe in the continent face, and maybe like and online, maybe, or like digital platform providing work. Most of them understand like maybe Outbreak. Yeah, so that's a key problem that refugees like myself face. So maybe if I can just add on that some context, like some real on the ground context. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Kamal. Maybe Stephen?
Yes, hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm called Stephen Matthew. I am one of the refugees also in Uganda. I've seen a lot of challenges, like when it comes to digital platforms or maybe online jobs. One of the biggest challenges, the negative perceptions towards the online jobs. Many refugees are having negative perception that these online things are all scams. So there's no way you can make money online. So my question is, what do you do to really solve that issue? Because it's something that is within the refugee community as we live. Thank you.
I think that's a great question for Brenda. And what some of the learnings you've because it's a mindset question we always have, like, how do you start changing the mindset we've been thinking about?
Yeah, so yeah, that's it's a very difficult one, and something we've realized is, because there's a lot of humanitarian assistance, when it comes to when we're trying to onboard refugees onto platforms, there's always been a misalignment with the expectations on what happens when they join the platforms, both from the refugee side, but also from the refugee side and also from the platform side, because there's maybe a tendency to ask for facilitation when it comes to data, airtime, transport, things like that. And then what happens is we end up having sort of a mindset issue, and we cannot, of course, solve that as a whole. It's not something that we can do. However, what we are doing in the efforts is the cohort, the segmentation. So we have noticed that refugees are quite very, very, very strong when it comes to their networking. So we are trying to see how do we leverage their networks so that we can sort of disrupt that in a sense. So what I mean there is, for example, there are platforms that we have onboarded, and what we do is we try and see, okay, which refugees, we get an outreach, we work with people, the refugee-led organizations like Ayan, Simon, where we do an outreach, we get all these refugees and engage with them. And then in those refugees, you see that there are different cohorts of refugees. And so you'll find that this platform has a selection criteria, and the refugees have different needs assessment depending on which community you're talking to. So what we do is we look at those who are 100% ready and those who are maybe 70 to 100% ready. And we treat that as the first cohort. So usually we do that because those are the early adopters. They don't need a lot of intervention, and those are people we can demonstrate success through. So by doing that with that first cohort, we expect, and we have also seen on one platform actually, that it sort of translates and makes it quite organic to the rest of the refugees, because they see success through this first cohort. The platform is also impressed by those because there's a business case for them, and then is able to continue onboarding more refugees. So you sort of see that switch from the efforts that we have made, and that's something we're still trying to build on. And yeah, so that's the most that we have been able to do. As I said, it's quite difficult. It requires a very overall disruptive systemic change, but that's something that we could control as Jobtech Alliance, and that's what we're doing.
Great,
Amazing.
thanks, Brenda.
Thanks, Brenda. Thanks, Michelle. This has been the most fantastic session. And I think this sort of shows us the innovation that's happening in this space. We're continually looking for new solutions, trying to understand how we can really scale that. And I think we have the same goal of job creation in Africa. However, we need innovation to do this. So thank you all for this fantastic session. We look forward to seeing you in the other sessions of the Migration Summit. We have 2 more sessions today, one about entrepreneurship coming up next, and one AI and migration coming up 3 hours later. So let's hope to see you then. This session is recorded. It will be on YouTube. So see you soon. And thank you, everyone. Have a really beautiful day.